reflects the Trump administration's broad view of foreign policy, and that is that the U.S. should not be overextending itself in international affairs, and that it's happy to express its desire for India and Pakistan to de-escalate, but that the U.S. is not going to expend significant levels of bandwidth to try to get the two sides to de-escalate. And that would be a significant change from the first Trump administration, where we know that during the 2019 crisis, the Trump administration was heavily engaged. Several senior officials were working very closely, engaging with the Indian and Pakistani sides. So that is notable. It seems to be a bit of a change and suggests that the U.S. commitment to full-scale mediation may not be there as much as it was during the first Trump administration. On the one hand, he is reiterating what has been a consistent message from the U.S. government throughout this crisis, and that is that the U.S. wants to see de-escalation, that it does not want to see more escalation. But I think it is notable in that it is a bit of a contrast from the messaging we've heard from the State Department, which has been emphasizing not only de-escalation, but the fact that the U.S. has been engaged with the Indian and Pakistani governments. And, we've heard that the Secretary of State, Rubio, has been speaking to his counterparts in Islamabad and New Delhi several times over the course of the crisis. But I think on the whole, the read I have of what Vance said is that it really reflects the Trump administration's broad view of foreign policy, and that is that the U.S. should not be overextending itself in international affairs, and that it's happy to express its desire for India and Pakistan to de-escalate, but that the U.S. is not going to expend significant levels of bandwidth to try to get the two sides to de-escalate. And that would be a significant change from the first Trump administration, where we know that during the 2019 crisis, the Trump administration was heavily engaged. Several senior officials were working very closely, engaging with the Indian and Pakistani sides. So that is notable. It seems to be a bit of a change and suggests that the U.S. commitment to full-scale mediation may not be there as much as it was during the first Trump administration. But I would say this: if the crisis worsens, if the hostilities increase, then I would not be surprised if, despite what Vance says, that the U.S. would then become much more engaged. The U.S. does not have an interest in an escalation. It does not want there to be a conflict between India and Pakistan. Well, I mean, we know that there's a pretty strong international consensus in favor of de-escalation, but I think it's a fairly small number of countries that would be in a position to try to mediate this crisis. And certainly the U.S. would have to be a top candidate just because there is a precedent. I mean, we know that the U.S. has been active in mediation efforts in 2019 and also in 1999 during the Kargil crisis. Those are the two that come to mind. The U.S. has, of course, a very warm relationship with India and has a very good relationship with Pakistan as well. But I think that there might be more viable mediation candidates further afield. They would not, in my view, include China. There's been a lot of talk about the role that China could play, but I think that China's significance in this crisis lies more in the security realm than in the diplomatic realm. China, of course, is a significant supplier of arms to Pakistan. And, there's indications that we've received in terms of recent reports that Chinese weaponry or Chinese-made weaponry has been used by Pakistan during this crisis. But I think in terms of mediation, China has strong relations with Pakistan, but its relationship with India is sufficiently fraught that I suspect that New Delhi would not view China as a viable mediator. I think that we're thinking about third party involvement in terms of mediation. I would certainly identify the Arab Gulf states, the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Qataris, just because they all have very strong relations with both India and Pakistan. They supply fuel and other products to India and Pakistan, which I think gives them some leverage. And there's a precedent. In 2021, the UAE helped mediate the discussions and negotiations that led to the LOC truce back in 2021. Well, I mean, yeah, if these reports are true, and if they're verified, the optics would be dreadful for Pakistan, given that Pakistan has insisted for quite some time that India is mistaken when it talks of terrorist infrastructure in Pakistan. It's and we know that the terrorist infrastructure is there. But if it's true that you have members of proscribed anti-India terrorist groups that are out in the public, obviously the optics of that are not good. And obviously, if you have military officers with them, it makes things even worse. It essentially validates the argument that India has been putting out there for so long. But I say that if these reports are verified, I think that, this would also speak to the broader challenge that lies before India. We know that it has sought for quite some time to try to degrade the threat posed by cross-border terrorism, posed by anti-India terrorists based in Pakistan. And there have been kinetic actions undertaken by India in the past, 2019, 2016, going back that before that. But clearly, this has not made the problem go away. And so, if it's true that you have, terrorists out there in the open attending funeral services, I think it reflects how India really needs to have a broader plan, which I think it does, meant to tackle and really eradicate this terrorism problem once and for all. And I think that grand plan would entail not only military action, but also broader punitive steps that are non-military in nature. And I think we've seen that in terms of some of the initiatives announced by, or the steps announced by India in recent days in terms of trying to cut off trade, suspending the Indus Waters Treaty, using water as leverage, trying to pressure Pakistan's funders to cut off assistance. It seems that India is trying to do more to address this problem of cross-border terrorism that has proven so difficult to tackle for so long. Well, I think domestic political factors are very strong in both cases, both India and Pakistan. I think that the Modi government was under significant pressure from the public to do something after the horrific terrorist attack in Kashmir last month, and the Modi government projects itself as strong, as decisive, and willing to hit back at terrorism. So I think that so many of us expected that India would eventually carry out airstrikes in India targeting terrorists that were behind these attacks. But I think that the pressure made the decision even easier, so to speak, in the sense that had the Modi government not acted, it would have been extremely politically damaging, I would argue. Now, on the Pakistani side, it's a bit of a different case. As you know, the civilian and military leadership in Pakistan have been quite unpopular for quite some time, and I would argue that this crisis actually is very helpful politically for the civilian and military leadership, in that it enables the government and the military to rally the public and rally the country around them, around the government and the military, and hope to win back some goodwill and trust, particularly because, in the case of the military, it's an opportunity to point to this notion of a threat posed by India, and the military has tended to use that notion of an Indian threat as justification for its outsized role in politics and statecraft and so on. So now the military can say, look, we're facing this onslaught, we're facing these attacks from India. this is our moment to rally together and go after this threat, so to speak. So in that sense, I think the military gets a bit of a political boost out of this, and given that there's been pretty strong anti-army sentiment within the public in Pakistan in recent years. Yeah, I think this is an opportunity to bring the country together, to try to transcend all of this political polarization and essentially rally the country around the media, pardon me, around the military, so that it's viewed as this protector that needs to have that strong role serving as a safeguard for Pakistan in the face of this Indian threat. So bottom line, political benefits abound, I think, at least in the immediate term, for the Pakistani state. Now, if there were to be an actual conflict, if there were to be a war, which I think is unlikely, but if that were to happen, that's where I think the disadvantages and the disadvantages come out and the benefits go away. In that, Pakistan's civilian and military leadership confronting economic stress, and an upsurge in terrorism. And the last thing that the country can afford is a war, which would clearly set back the economy. And I think it could lead to a very chaotic situation where terrorists would try to exploit security forces being diverted to the border with India, focused on that conflict, and terrorists could try to do more damage in Pakistan if there were to be a war. And that clearly does not benefit the government's interest or the military's interests. Well, I mean, I think that for India, the main concern would be stock, how markets would respond, how markets would react. I mean, we know that markets don't react well to uncertainty and volatility, and obviously, there's nothing more, representative of a very volatile, unpredictable situation than this growing crisis between India and Pakistan. So I think that the market effects could be pretty significant for India. I think that at this point, for India at least, the economic impacts would not go beyond these concerns for markets. If we were actually going to go into a conflict, then it's a whole other story. But I think that India, I mean, just because generally speaking, its macroeconomy is in a very good position, growth has been strong. I think it can withstand these market pressures and market concerns, so long as we're not looking at an actual conflict. Yeah, Pakistan is different. Its economy is more vulnerable. Certainly, the market perceptions would not be good. That would not help Pakistan's economy overall. Pakistan's macroeconomy has stabilized a bit in recent months, with inflation having gone down and the currency performing better and foreign reserves in better shape. So there's a bit more strength there. Um, Again, the situation changes if you were to have an actual war. But given what are inherent volatilities in Pakistan because of terrorism, the incidents of terrorism, and just the broader volatilities of the country with Baluchistan and all it has going there, and the restive nature of so much of the country, I think there's always going to be some investor jitters, even in the best of times, and for investors to see this very serious crisis between Pakistan and India, I think that could add to those jitters just a bit, especially if there are no indications that there's going to be a de-escalation anytime soon.